Let's.
All right, the YouTube badge is up.
I think it's actually working.
From a remote location.
Yeah, exactly.
From a hotel room somewhere in California, I assume.
From a Holiday Inn Express deep in the valley of California.
I will not be able to. Bill, you might have to grab the URL. I will not be able to grab it all.
Grab the URL of the Zoom recording?
No, the YouTube recording.
Oh, the YouTube recording.
I can post it.
If you can post it, that's great. Oh, that's right,
thanks,
Jeffrey. You can grab it. Yeah. Well, no, you can't. Jeffrey, I don't. Well, anyway. Well,
I only have it on my iPad, so I can't grab it from there.
I think Guy is familiar with the Mukana
the iframe code into Mukana?
Yeah. If you can do that. Okay, great, Guy. Thanks.
Excellent.
And hand over the con when you're good.
Let's see if I can figure that out again. Hold on. So for those of you watching on YouTube, this is the first time here we go. Let's see.
Initiating office hours from an iPad. It's not an easy thing.
Oh my gosh. So, all right. I'm in LA, and I didn't. I was like, oh, I don't need a laptop today because I was trying to travel light, and I couldn't get a long story. Anyway, so I figured I wouldn't need it. I'm just doing a site survey, and and then I forgot that I have to need my laptop for this. So I'm coming to you from a phone, an iPhone 12. I look okay. Still pillar box because of Zoom. And anyway, so I'm in a hotel room and coming to you, and we've kind of figured out how to make this work on an iOS device. It's not trivial. I don't think Zoom's implementation on iOS is very good. So anyway, we're here and ready to go. So I'm going to get started. Hey everybody, if you're welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube and you see the little link down below, you can actually join the Zoom conversation. If you're here as an attendee and you would like to be part of this conversation, part of the panel here, and you think that you have something to add to the conversation, we open the doors. We need to be here by 6:40 Pacific Standard Time for mic checks. We open the doors at 6 o'clock to 6:40, us figuring stuff out, having tea and coffee, me figuring out how to run an iOS device for Zoom, and in general discussion. And then if you get here at 6:40, we will actually do a mic check. Once we do the mic check, we're kind of in a pattern, so you can't join to that. At 7 o'clock, we do general Q&A. So we really depend on your questions, you voting questions up and down, you asking those quick questions. I mean, this is an incredible resource to ask questions. So we encourage you to ask the questions before the show, but also during the show as it goes through. Second hour is a more specialized hour, typically a video, typically a video today, Wednesdays. Thursdays is we're going to talk about, this week, we're going to talk about multi-language streaming. And on Friday, I'm trying to do this off the top of my head because I don't have my notes because I'm on an iOS device. So on Friday, we're talking about something else. and we're sending out those announcements now with your morning reminder. So the morning reminders are going to have a list of what those announcements are. Sorry for the little bit of a disheveled start. Sorry, building kits, remote kits. So we're going to talk about remote kits on Friday, just what we use to build those remote kits. Saturday is going to be education, and then Sunday is general discussion. So that's how we kind of run it. If you can, definitely come for those second hours, but the first hour is generally just all general Q&A, and we really depend on you for those questions. So Bill, go ahead and let's jump into the questions.
Okay, A. Mitchell's a frequent flyer in the question thing from Washington. Says, for those who joined in the Zoom room test rooms yesterday, how was your experience? Thoughts, comments, anecdotes, monologues, soliloquies, etc.
And Bill, I'm going to have you call on people because I can't see everybody on my phone. This is a really horrible experience.
Fair enough. That's absolutely okay. And nobody's hands up right now, so I will talk about it a little. It was really fun. Right? Yeah, Sky's in now. Sky, do you want to start off, and then I'll.
My church actually uses it fairly regularly, and I've always been assigned a room. So this was the first opportunity I had to choose my own room. And that, like junior high, reminded me of wanting to sit with the cool kids, and then they would just jump out and go to a different room. But I did get to hang out with, several people that I hadn't known before, so that was a great opportunity.
Yeah, that's
much more intimate.
Biggest takeaway was that a lot of people who lurk here as attendees but never show up actually showed up for this test. So I was seeing people that I had seen questions from, and sometimes frequent questions that I had never seen before. So that was great. So for those of you who attended that way and popped up only in that, you need to get your video going and get into the regular panel. Eric Hall, go ahead.
Well, I'd be curious to know whether there was any testing, or actually is polling in breakout rooms available yet?
We didn't do any polling that I saw, but Alex may have some additional information on how that's going to come in over time. Alex, did you?
I have no idea about. I don't know about polling. The one thing that we have that's slightly separate from everyone else is the ability to have polling and Q&A and comments that are unified between all the breakout rooms because of Makana. Because we have a separate system. People can we have our own polling system internally, so we don't use it that often in this case, but we can. And so I don't really relate to the polling on Zoom that much. So I don't really know much about it. I do know that one of the things I'm more interested in now is the breakout rooms in webinars. I'm not interested in going to meetings. I still feel like they're a little bit of, there's a couple of things. I think they're a little chaos, like a little bit of controlled chaos. I also think that there's a lot of people that don't, we open the doors to people to open, to join the panel every day, and only a small percentage do. I don't think that everyone is ready to be on, have their camera opened all the time. And so as a result, I don't feel like meetings is necessarily a great solution for everyone. So I'm not that interested in meetings. And so breakout rooms was not really something I considered as an option. The reason we did the breakout test yesterday was because we've got an event coming up where they've changed from webinar to meetings. And I realized that I just didn't have my head completely around breakout rooms and how they work. And so we were very fortunate to have so many people jump in and test something. And I actually thought it was a great little mixer. When I jumped from one room to the other, there was all these great little isolated, conversations that had cropped up. And so I definitely think that once breakout rooms are available in webinar, we may use them more aggressively in this group, where we can do breakouts, where we let everyone break out and we let everyone chat for a little bit and then come back. I don't know exactly when or how we'll do that, but I do, plan to plan to test that a lot more. I think there was something about it that let members see each other and discuss stuff with each other that was unique.
One of my takeaways that was interesting was that I was immediately attracted to the loud room. So I didn't even know what it was, but it said the loud room, and I said, that's where I'm going. So I think naming rooms actually makes a difference. Yeah. Jason was next, and then we'll go to Hasmuk. But Alex, do you want to talk about the naming convention you decided on?
It was as fast as I could try to type. It was like whatever. It was truly a stream of consciousness. I was like, oh, I have to name the rooms, and I just started naming rooms. And I'd love to say that there was a science behind it. It wasn't. It was just I was typing and just making stuff up while I was like, and we will call this one the loud room.
There we go.
So anyway,
that's the room for me, Jason.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna say what has been said before in that. I love the camaraderie of office hours, and I love seeing a fairly uniform group of panelists, and it's been great getting to know you all and talking to all of you. But it was even better to see the people that are that little 143 integer down at the bottom. That was great.
Okay, let's go to Hasmuk and then Stuart.
Yeah, for me it was a great experiment and a revelation, because for my COSA lessons, I then thought about putting some of the attendees into small rooms so that they can practice the pronunciation amongst themselves. And then a talent as the teacher can walk into each room and just listen and correct them, and then come out again and go back to the big meeting. I think it's a terrific option.
Nice. Stuart?
Building on other people's comments, the loud room was the cool room, Sky. And what was really delightful to notice was, on average, our attendees who are participants tonight who aren't in the panel, the average quality that we saw from their cameras, their lighting, their sound, was well above what we would see on other meetings with other people. The people watching, I am so glad you've all been able to pick your game up and be good examples for everyone else to follow.
That's great. So yeah, we'll do more of that. I'm going to wait for the update where we get Zoom rooms and Zoom breakouts in webinars. But once we do that, expect to see more of us finding ways to have us all get to see each other more often. Next question.
Okay, back from A. Mitchell's again. Checking out Brella as a part of the StreamTV event this week, currently in the pre-event personality networking portion of the conference. Has anyone tried this platform before? And if so, experiences and or thoughts? And I'm not seeing any immediate hands going up. Is there? I guess we're looking at it here. There's the Brella interface.
Yeah,
Brella.
it's just a simple interface. It's looks like there's a few different companies that have done it. I guess VidCon used Brella for their virtual event as well.
Interesting. Okay.
I'll admit that I still think that all of these are. I just don't. I think that we're gonna. If it depends on how long COVID lasts, but if this lasts for a while, I think we're gonna find people getting to what matters is simple communication, and people interacting with each other. I'm not sure. I'm still not a big. I don't know if virtual events as we're going to have six tracks and a whole bunch of places that you can go and everything else makes as much sense virtually as it did when you would go and visit there. And so I'm not with all of these. I kind of look at them like, okay. I mean, it's an event team event teams are using it because they're trying to figure out how to stay relevant. But I think that what really is going to make a difference is kind of constant contact, which you can do now in a way that you couldn't before. When everyone accepts that they can't come there and they can all do it from their house. I think finding ways to engage people on a weekly, monthly basis, daily basis, in our case, is far more powerful than trying to bring them all together for a 3-day event or a 2-day event or even a 1-day event. We see people with a 1-day event, we see viewership dropping by, anywhere from 30 to 60% throughout the day. That while there may be a lot left at the end, I think that it would go the other direction if they were doing it. If they took that a 6-hour, 8-hour event and spread it over 2 or 3 weeks in 2-hour increments, because people can then talk about it in between, give them time to think about it. It doesn't take up 6 hours of their day. So I think that I still think there's going to be some rethinking around that's going on, and I see more and more people doing it now. Maybe these all-day events or don't make as much sense as a regular communication. So
okay, Jeffrey, then George, then Sky, if your hand is still up, and then we'll go to Eric after that. But Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, I think the big thing is just the analytics option that they have with some of these platforms, because with Zoom you can't. Where are the analytics on?
I have a ton of analytics
to find out. You do? Okay. Well, I have never seen an analytics page that would match something like what YouTube would have. And
I have way more information on Zoom. You have way more information in Zoom than you ever had in YouTube. When every person entered, exited, how long they stayed. There's how many minutes they watched. It's 10 times more data in Zoom than you have in YouTube. So
George Kennedy.
Then I got nothing.
Oh, excuse me.
Go ahead,
George Kennedy.
So to Alex's point, I was in a demo yesterday with vMix with a client, and they constantly kept on asking me, well, can we have like 4 sessions going at the same time and have folks jump from room to room? And I'm saying to myself, no. I mean, you're talking about having 2 different studios pushing to 4 different.
And we're bidding on
events.
those. I mean, we have an event coming up next year that we're bidding on. It's like 6. They want to do 6 tracks at the same time, and it makes it really expensive. And again, you're now forcing all of your viewers to make a choice, and there's no reason to. You could just spread it out and let them choose all of them. All the ones that they want to go to.
Okay. So let me just mention one more. So did you guys notice yesterday, Tim Cook? I mean, it was a good event, but right at the top of the show, he kind of mentioned that in a few months we have done X amount of events, and that was interesting to me to hear him say that they're probably not going to be going back to doing physical events anytime soon.
Well, it's way easier to do the kind of events that they're doing now are way easier to execute than a live event on stage because it's just a video production. So you're only tying a certain number of people down when they're being shot and when they're doing the sections. With a smaller video team, you know, I'm sure it's still very expensive to do it the way Apple does it, but it's a much more manageable, it's much less impact. And the reality is, for the viewer, it's a much better experience. It's just a much better experience to watch that production. I don't know what the final numbers were, but the last time I looked, you know, I did a thing on Twitter of like, would you prefer to have these pre-recorded ones, or would you prefer to have Apple go back to stage? And I believe it was somewhere between the, you know, 80% plus or minus a couple percentage points. So they'd prefer to watch the pre-produced video about what came up. Now people will say, well, you know, the press won't come, but they will. Like, I'm in the press. You know, if you get offered post-COVID, if you get offered a chance to go to the Apple campus, get to play with the equipment right afterwards, I think most press would show up and just watch the video, you know, in the big screen. That would sound better, look better, everything, and then walk out and be able to interact with Apple employees and talk about devices. I don't think they would have any loss in the number of people showing up for that. And I think that, again, for the viewers, when you have millions of people watching the actual video, the experience is just way more efficient than. And people said, well, so a couple of people responded to me on Twitter. They said, well, all those people are clapping. Those people, I mean, you know, people in all of these keynotes, there's employees that are brought in to clap. It's not the press clapping. Press just sits there. So, you know, the press doesn't clap. So, so for all of these keynotes that we work on, there's people that do that for you. So anyway, so I think that anyway, I think that we're going to see a lot more of that, and they can do them at a much higher frequency because it's a much lower lift, you know, okay, for production. Go ahead.
We had Eric, Sky, and then Jason, and then Stephen Kimbrough. Eric, go ahead.
I was going to say real quick that it's not my favorite mode of communication, but there is a Facebook group that's called the Zoom Test Kitchen. It's run by a guy, I think, who is also in this, or at least a participant here, Jeff Widgren. And yes, that he makes announcements in that group occasionally of mass Zoom joins, so you can test things out.
Mm-hmm. No, that's cool.
Sky?
Yeah, Jeff is out of Kansas City. He's awesome. So I did think it was interesting that they focus, the backdrop is the building that they built and now that nobody's in. So you've got a pretty amazing, you know, you don't have to do infinity walls and things like we used to do in studios. And back to the Brella concept is the solution to try to get a little more intimate and a little more, I think it's just one of the original concepts of breakout rooms that now Zoom is starting to expand. And then there was a third thing and it's gone.
That's all right. We'll go to Jason and then Stephen Kimbrough to finish up. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, I'll leave it at this. There's a reason that no university in the world will teach students as a rule for more than 2 hours in a row. And it's just because of the way that human attention works. Like you even a 3 hour, 3 credit hour once a week course, undergraduate, you're always going to have a break in the middle. And I wish more companies would realize that that's how we pay attention.
Stephen Kimbrough.
I think the only reason there's people want to see this live and not recorded is they want to see the accidents that happen.
Probably.
And there's
Alex,
no accidents this way.
Alex, you want to comment before we move on? Or Sky?
Yeah, I remember my question. So Alex, speaking of accidents and kitchen and cooking, what would you do with 100 humans coming in to learn how to cook which is going to be happening on November 29th for us? Would you use a breakout concept? Would you, or just do a webinar?
I mean, the big thing you need, once you get over a handful of people, you really need to have a Q&A system. You have to take text questions. Like you can have a conversation with, you can have a conversation with up to 20 or 30. That's really where it stops. Once you get over that, while people are cooking, if you go over that number, you really need a text Q&A so that people can be pushing questions in and voting questions up and that type of thing. Otherwise it just gets chaos. It's chaos. Either no one gets their questions answered or it's just chaos. So
well, we have an audience engagement officer who will be doing that. We'll have a point person. So yep. Brilliant. But you're saying text so we don't have the cacophony of people. Got it.
Yeah. Otherwise it's just, you can't talk fast enough, but you can stack up those questions and like we're doing here. Stack those questions up and move through them. Yep.
So is Meccano available on the back end?
Yep. Yeah, we can make that work.
We'll talk, sir. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. And folks, you can ping me in Discord if you're interested. We're going to let people start to beta test it. It's still rough, and there's some registration issues, and it's still a piece, kind of a bespoke solution at the moment. But we are looking for a handful of people who want to do it. But you have to kind of let us know what it is, and it can't be I've got 10 people. It's got to be like 100 people that are using it, because it doesn't work as well for less. Anyway, next question.
Moving on to Roger Miles of Lake Zurich, Illinois. In Zoom meetings, there is now a signal strength icon displayed on the name used in speaker view. What is that supposed to represent? Just the brand new version today? Jason has his hand up first. Jason?
It's not new. I mean, I've seen it. I think what's new is that it's constantly available. But yeah, for quite a while, you would see it, and I believe what it is a combination of ping time, jitter, and upstream.
Ah, okay. So
we find it almost arbitrary. So
it's completely arbitrary.
It's funny that it's there, and the annoyance that we have with it is that it's in our rooms when we do Zoom rooms and we do an output. It's the only icon that doesn't disappear, and we find that to be hilarious, because it's the one that we don't regard as useful. So the one that doesn't disappear is the one that we know isn't useful. So anyway.
Okay, moving on to Gabriel Ung out of Malaysia asks, Heil, is there a way to batch process audio levels for video clips? I've received about 30 video clips with different audio levels and would like to make them all hit a target LUFS value. Thanks. Okay, I saw Peter Moore up first, so let's do, am I seeing you, Peter, or is that your guitar? Did you raise your hand, or am I seeing your guitar?
No.
Yeah, in the bottom right corner, I'm seeing your guitar rack, and I was interpreting that as fingers. That's entirely no problem. Jeff Francis is coming in to answer, though. Thanks, Jeff.
That is Peter's guitarsenal. So for batch processing of audio, Isotope RX, and it has a lot of tools, and it has one that has a loudness tool where you can set a LUFS level. I haven't tested whether you can drop a video file on there and have it just process the audio, but I'll look into that. But Isotope.
Worst comes to worst, you'd export the audio, run that, then bring it back in and resync it. But then Mickey and then Mike Burns after that. Oh, Jeff, did you have a follow-up? No? Okay. Mickey?
A quick question, Jeff. Can Isotope RX standard do batch processing, or is that just an advanced thing?
Good question. I'll look and let you know.
I think it's an advanced thing, but if my suggestion would be check out the Reaper, because you could do a lot of batch processing within Reaper, and it's a free tool. Although like 30 clips, it's not that much to do, manually one by one. You can get it done in 15 minutes depending on the length of the video. But yeah, 30 seconds per video shouldn't be that much if it's just automated automatic normalization. If you're doing if you're heading into the hundreds or thousands of clips, you might want to check out Nusion Audio's they call it AMB, audio management batch processor, and a lot of people that work on, say, video games where you have tens of thousands of little sounds, that's what they use.
Okay, we're going to do Mike, then Jason, then Victor.
Yeah, so for complete nincompoop like myself, who has no idea what he's doing with audio, RX7 is like magic sauce. And I also just noticed they're about to run a huge Black Friday deal where they're packaging a bunch of their stuff for very, very cheap. So go to their website and check it out.
It's great. Jason?
Along those lines, by the way, Restream's biggest sale of the year is always on Black Friday. For those of you who want to try it, it's significantly cheaper. I was simply going to say that there's no reason that compressors shouldn't be able to activate any plugin and just turn it on. So, as long as you have a preset for your Isotope. Am I wrong, Jeff?
No, I was just going to clarify about Isotope. The batch and loudness is in the standard and the advanced, just not in the elements.
Very good. Yeah. So compressor has access to your kind of global, your global architecture of plugins, and there's no reason you couldn't just bring it in, as far as I can tell, and just roll it.
Okay. Victor was up next. Oops, Victor's screen sharing, but you're muted. Or at least something is happening, and I'm getting
No,
no
I'm
sound.
screen sharing. I'm screen sharing their Black Friday deal for
I actually think that compressor even has a normalization built into it. So I think that there's one of the default plugins is normalization. So I would use compressor for it.
Sorry, I think I'm not muted anymore. RX8 you can just drop a movie file into it and edit the audio and normalize it.
That's great. So either RX or compressor probably would solve the problem. Next question.
Moving along to Ruben Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hello, with the new Mac Mini will the new Mac Mini handle the files of a Canon R5 camera, or would it choke like a 2016 MacBook Pro with 16 megs of memory and a 10,000 DDS drive? Never heard that. But anyway, let's do Jason and then Alex Skolner.
For bespoke purposes like photography, and again, this is speculation, we don't know, but I would be shocked if you could find a still image that would be too big to be ingested faster than you're used to. But again, we'll see.
Alex Skolner.
It's interesting. On the one hand, we don't want to. Some people feel they're limited to only having 16 gigabytes of RAM on their NLE or their graphics software, because 16 gigs is not very much. It's fine, of course, if you're an NLE, because you only need the frames that are all the clips are displaying at one time, and 16 gigs of RAM is quite a lot. But the other aspect of the M1 chip, which is the same in the Mini and the two MacBooks, MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, is the same chip. It's essentially the memory is built into the chip. That's the problem. 16 gig is the fact that because it's unified architecture between the GPU and the CPU, it's a bit like having 2 gigabytes of RAM plus 14 gig in your GPU. Now, having 14 gig in your GPU means lots of cool compositing possibilities that most people haven't had in discrete GPUs ever. So it's a weird kind of combination that we have to kind of really realize it's an architecture change, and we don't really know what it's going to be like, because when it comes to, certainly with NLEs, which is of course what I'm interested in, motion graphics and compositing of lots of, multi-gigabytes of data coming off multiple clips all at the same time, it's the speed of your storage. And they've said with the M1 chip is that the storage speed has doubled. And that's really interesting, because if you look at the spec of a MacBook Air, their speed was in 2019 is 1 gigabyte, a write speed of 1 gigabyte per second, and read speeds of 1.3 gigabytes per second. So doubling those is pretty good. So we kind of really have to wait. There's a good chance, weirdly enough, if you're dealing with 20 gigabyte files, 30 gigabyte files, 3 of them or 4 of them playing at the same time, the few gigs that you need from each of those files playing at the same time and compositing at the same time is relatively low. And as long as the storage is fast and the actual GPUs and CPUs are fast, you might be okay. So the question is wait for people to do the tests and find out, because weirdly enough, that Mac Mini could actually be a lot better than anyone even expects, because essentially you're just picking your form factor around the same chip and around the same storage. It's quite weird. It's quite different from before. So we have to kind of reset our minds when it comes to these new computers.
Things are evolving. Peter Sargent, then Jason Bass. Go, Peter.
Well, I was actually going to agree heartily with Alex. The key thing here is, this is between the system on a chip and the NVMe memory for storage, right? You're going to be able to handle much higher I/O rates for everything. And I mean, I've been looking at my system, one of my Mac Minis today, and I mean, paging, if nothing else, is going to be faster than whatever. Trying to keep it clean.
Faster than heck.
Yeah, that wasn't the first word that came to mind, but okay.
All right. You got more. Go ahead.
But that's the key, as you were saying, Alex, is how fast can I move things in and out of memory, and then between the two memory users, which are the graphics GPUs and the base CPUs, right?
I mean, being able to design an OS to take advantage of the hardware and then build an integrated hardware that is no longer the modularity of a computer makes it easy to upgrade. It makes it easy to do a lot of other things, but it also makes it inefficient. You're constantly going out of this and into this and out of this and into this, and you're slowed down by the bus, and you're now dealing with someone else's architecture, and there's all these things that make it inefficient. And I think that In this first iteration, I don't expect it to be a hardcore workhorse for pros,
No.
which is why I'm probably sitting out. But I think that for very many people, these new laptops are going to be great. They're going to do exactly what they need to do. And for developers trying to figure out how does this work, it's enough for them to figure out, to start building and testing and so on and so forth for the next thing. I can see an M2 or an M3 chip having 32 gigs of RAM or 64 gigs of RAM built in. And then, kind of the, and if you start getting to a chip like this, 16 is not a lot. But you start getting to something where 32 or 64 is built into it, you're talking about, that's the kind of thing you drop in as your base unit into a Mac Pro, and then you have, but it would be like a giant L2 cache, and then you have other RAM that you can add to it. But that starts to become just a very frighteningly fast machine to be able to have that kind of RAM access to it.
Remember, Alex, I started out in 1981 working for a company that owned the hardware and the software stack top to bottom on this funny thing called a mainframe, and that's exactly the path we took, right?
Moving to Jason Bache and then Stephen Kimbrough, and then Stuart.
In my ongoing, first things first, it is hard to understate how much faster things get when the I/O is completely SoC. There it is in a sentence. This is the OWC Express. This is full Thunderbolt, and this works with any M2 drive, I believe. I put an OWC one in, but I mean, it'll go as high as you want it to. And these are incredibly inexpensive. The enclosure, again, dedicated Thunderbolt 3, and it, well, take a look in Discord, because I put some pretty impressive torture tests through, and this one's pretty great.
Stephen Kimbrough.
What was the price point on that, and how big is it?
Enclosure's $50, and it's pretty much any M2 drive you put into it. I believe OWC sells up to 4 terabytes, and that would be, in a tiny, tiny little M2.
Wow.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, with M2 memory, that is memory. It's so fast. But what was, on your board, those little sticks you put in aren't as fast as this. So, yes, you have essentially level 1, level 2 cache, and the screamingly fast disk that is now part of the memory chain. So this could be a screamer.
Yeah. Moving to Stuart.
Most of us would be aware that one of the limitations in processing power that everyone's facing is how fast you can switch a transistor in silicon, which is why we keep going smaller and smaller nanometers. Seeing as how this is a RISC chip and it's got the memory built in and the GPU built in, is there any way that this sort of hardware could be assembled as parallel cores in the same way we would have multiple CPUs on an old style desktop? And would that give us a boost in power to look towards the next potential Mac Pro?
I have Alex, Jason, and then Peter Sargent. Go, Alex Golner.
Well, I think the way that inside the iPhone and iOS, the old chips and the current and the new M1 chip is the fact that they're very wide inside. In other words, they're taking 7 or 8 old style Intel instructions at the same time, and they're kind of prefetching and doing switches like 500 or 600 instructions ahead. So that's quite difficult to distribute to another chip next door to it. The kind of Sony cell-based kind of thing that we were hoping for in the mid-aughts. So yes, I mean, it would be nice to have multiple chips. At the moment, I would guess not necessarily, obviously not with the M1, although ZDNet says it has a PCI 4, PCI Express 4 in it, which is better than the Mac Pro, which is quite weird in terms of actually wanting to interconnect, or maybe the SoC will just be able to plug into the old Mac Pro. But I think not for a while, not in the. I would guess this is like the PowerPC 601, and you're thinking about the PowerPC 620 when it comes to that sort of thing in terms of turning it into a cell processor. Just a guess.
Peter Sargent, then Jason, then Mickey.
Yeah, I was actually, I don't know, Alex, you and I obviously worked on some similar things in the past, but I mean, the only way out of this, I think, is something that Alex Lindsay said earlier. I mean, they own the hardware stack and the software stack. They could attach multiple chips using something like InfiniBand or even something faster at this point on the PCI 4 bus. but unless you update the operating system, it won't know what to do.
Well, and I think that's the advantage of having people write to metal. So as developers are writing to metal, it allows Apple to basically make any upgrades they need to in the OS, and be able to continually expand the power without the developers having to change anything.
Well, I was just merely commenting that Apple has to fix some things to make that work. That's all.
Oh, but they would, but I think that is why they pushed everybody to metal, was that so that they can continually upgrade the way that the operating system and the hardware interact with each other without it affecting developers. Developers don't have to write to something new to do that. They just write to metal, and metal as the system moves forward. Now I finally got into Macana on my iPad. You should probably move faster through this question.
So metal, just to finish up, metal is not just a GPU language, it's a scheduling system for making sure that all the GPUs and CPUs have got lots of stuff to do. So it's not just shaders, it's really a lot more than that, and it's for multiple different kinds of hardware.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jason, next.
Real quick.
Holy questions. I should just yield my time. So I'll give Stuart's answer one question, or Stuart's question one answer, not without a significant penalty of moving in and out. Yeah.
So significant penalty meaning back to as fast as anything is anywhere else.
Right. Exactly.
So we have question. Mickey and then Stephen Kimber. Or do you want me to move on to the next one?
Yeah, we're gonna start moving faster. We're gonna do like three people per.
Okay, moving on to Hasmik's question from Cape Town, South Africa. Inner monitor options here in South Africa are quite limited. Need a second inner monitor for talent. Considering ordering a Sennheiser IE 40 Pro, which is about $99 US. Any comments? Who do we have? Guy Cochran. Yay, Guy, go.
Yeah, I'm wearing those right now. It depends on how you're going to use them and what you have them plugged into, because mine sound they're pretty flat hooked up to this sound device's Mix Pre 6. So I think a lot of people appreciate that are monitoring audio. But when I hooked up this same set to something with higher quality digital analog converters, the Electrosonics, in particular the Duet, I was surprised by how much these opened up. So don't just think of the chain as to what the headphones for $99. Think of what you're plugging them into. So if you're plugging them into like a Rode Wireless Go, which I heard you use before, Hasmik, that doesn't even have like a volume output. So you might want to, explore that as well.
Hasmik, it's your question. You want to weigh in on additionals?
Yeah, this is for the talent, so that the talent can listen to the Zoom session and also hear me from a second mic, so that I can give them instructions or advice. So that's really what I'm thinking. I don't want to buy a Sidekick. It's too expensive for a talent.
Okay. Jason, you had your hand up for a little bit. Do you want to weigh in?
Guy's answer was perfect. Okay. They're great. I'm using them.
Okay. I guess that means we're moving on to the next question. And it comes from Tyler Roberts.
Sorry, a quick thing. I got kicked out because I had to switch internet providers. And I lost host. So if Alex could hand it back.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Tyler Roberts from Chambersburg. What are practice uses of Lidar? Are there apps that are worth checking out for the iPhone 12 Pro? Alex, you probably should jump into this.
Yeah.
Finish
I mean, the big thing with Lidar, there's a couple things. As a user, let me close this up. As a user of Lidar, it's going to make a big difference on how interactive things are around you. So the Lidar on your phone is going to immediately be able to place objects in space in front of you in real time without any kind of movement back and forth. A lot of times your iPhone right now asks you to move your phone back and forth. That's so that it can get parallax, figure out where the scene is. You don't need to do that with Lidar. It knows where that is. The second thing is that for surveying things, and Sitescape's beta for the iPhone was released during the show. I got a little notification, so I performed test flight. So Sitescape is the one that I want to test. There's also the 3D scanner app. Make sure to get the one with the little house, not the purple one with the squares and the cubes. And what you'll see there is the ability to get a raw data of a room or a location. The thing that's going to happen, we're really in early days, 320 by 240 days of a video, 320 by 240 video, or even 160 by 120 at the moment. But what we're going to see is the interaction, I believe, between structured light, which is Lidar, and unstructured light, which is photography. when those two things get mixed together, you're going to get the accuracy of the LiDAR with the detail of the photography, and you're going to end up being able to use your phone to basically pull a 3D model of almost anything that's in front of you. And then you'll be able to export that out, put it into your, if you look at motion, you'll be able to literally take a picture of something in 3D with your phone and put it into motion and animate it. And that could happen in minutes. Now, will the quality of it be at the highest level? I don't know yet. You know, it will be eventually. Right now, it's still pretty rough. But also think about when Apple eventually makes it available in Pages and in Keynote, and other apps make USDZ available. Imagine being able to add 3D objects at almost the same ease of use as you added photography. And that comes down to all kinds of things. I was talking about it over the weekend. We were looking, a friend of mine was looking at a pipe system that they had, and we were trying to figure out how to replace the pipes and stop it from leaking and everything else. And I just made a 3D model of it so that and sent it to him, so he can now take it and take it to the hardware store and rotate it in front of them, and he has little measurements and things, and those kinds of things can be, you know, very practical uses of it. So there's going to be a lot from the phone perspective of LiDAR, but also from the consumer perspective of just being able to tie into your location really effectively. So it should be it's one of the most exciting upgrades to a phone that has ever happened. But we're in the very beginning. Go ahead, real quick.
The name of the app is which? Sitescape Pro?
Sitescape, I think, is the one that is the beta that I'm about to start testing today. And the other one to play with is 3D Scanner app, and make sure to get the one with the house. All right, let's go to the next question.
Yeah, Ashudev of New York City says, thoughts on the new M1 Max. Does anyone know more about UMA, Unified Memory Architecture? Is 16 gigabyte UMA limitation and no external graphic card support an issue for audio and video editing, or are the M1's going to run Logic and Final Cut Pro 10 like butter? Jason had his hands up first.
And we'll go real quick through this one since we kind of
we've already covered this. The answer is I'll know in 2 weeks, because I look forward to putting it through its paces. I got a Mac Mini with 16 gigs and I think 512 or 256. I don't remember. I externalized storage.
Can't wait to see what you come up with there. All right, next question.
Yeah, there is some confusion out there. Just really quickly, I saw this morning, I think I was going through Reddit, and somebody had a picture of the dual display that they used to announce these on the and Final Cut Pro 10 running on the new Air, and he thought it was two separate windows. He was arguing he didn't realize it was two 8K sources running in real time on the MacBook Air because of the new chips. So that's just...
I think theoretically Logic and Final Cut will run much faster.
Yeah.
You know, like they will be actually higher performance on those little machines than they were larger ones. So I think there's incredible efficiencies that are coming. Next question.
Gabriel Ung from Malaysia says, I'm running a live stream event with back-to-back panel discussions using mimocall or vMix call. Is there a way for my producer to mic video check with the next group of panelists within Mimo Live or vMix while the software is being used to mix the live program? We don't have an IFB setup. Stuart has his hand up first.
Go ahead, Stuart.
And George.
Yeah, there is. And this will look really low quality because I'm just going to do a digital zoom to my screen beside me so I can point to a couple of different things. Here on vMix, you can assign inputs to different, like master A, B bus. You can assign the bus to also go to either speakers or headset. So if you assign an incoming audio source to bus B, and bus B goes to your headset only, you can then listen to that source separate to the main mix. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And if Gabriel needs any help, message me in Discord.
Yeah, I'm noticing Mickey is dropping out and coming in, so the Philippines must be having some things. And I've noticed some audio anomalies in levels and things like that. So everybody just pay a little attention to how you sound back to yourselves. I think
Bill,
that's it.
if need be, I can switch if Mickey drops out completely.
Yeah, let's just give him a chance, see if, but we never know. The storm in the Philippines may be big and he may not be able to get back, so we'll watch that.
Next question.
Charles Klein, Vision with...
that's for the next question, second hour. Yep.
Yeah, hang on a second. Let me move that back over. And so we're going to go to Jonas Tatal of Reutlingen's question. Is there a reason why the audio on the audio-only stream has more noise than the YouTube stream? Let's say, Jason, go ahead.
If I were to guess, I would say because they're two separate pipelines.
Yeah. I mean, and things are being a little bit more compressed in the stream to Makana, than YouTube. YouTube's kind of the raw output, and there's some compression going on in the YouTube one. And I don't know where we are getting a lot more noise than normal today. I don't know if someone's got an open mic that has more raw noise.
Yeah, I've been watching that. The only open mic at that point was Bill, so maybe you need to check your gate or something.
It may be me. It's interesting. I plugged in my iPhone, but then at the same time, Mickey dropped out, and I noticed my level really came up hugely.
Try muting. Yeah, it's you.
Okay.
So Bill, if you can mute between, that'd be good.
Yeah,
all right, we'll figure out what's going on. You got a lot of white noise in there. All right, next question.
And sorry, just to chime in, it's definitely the additional dynamic range compression on the Makana audio stream that's bringing the noise level up.
Yep.
Okay.
And Bill, are you on original audio?
Yes, I am on original sound.
Turn that off.
Turn it off. Okay, stand by. Okay, it is officially off now.
Interesting. Didn't make a lot of. There it is. There it went away. Now talk a little bit.
Okay, testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
So
5.
this is a good example. This is actually a good example of when not to use original sound. Is when we have something in the pipeline for whatever reason is creating some kind of constant noise. We have the attendees turn off their original sound because Zoom will do a lot of that work for you. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay, A. Mitchells of Washington says, speaking of Restream, wait a second, what happened there? Did George Kennedy find a better solution for his Restream multi-event workflows? And if so, what was it and how did the experience go? Good, bad, better, best? So George, are you still here? Yeah, you're still here.
I'm here. I haven't been using Restream. I'm not sure what question he's referring to.
Okay.
Right. Anybody else using Restream?
We use Restream a bit. I mean, we've used it for some clients that like to have it. I mean, it's relatively automatic. I find a lot of things about it to be a little too simple. So I don't feel like I can grab onto things that I need to grab onto. So, we're building more and more into the AW pipeline, as there's a lot of upgrades to the links that have happened. And so we're taking more and more advantage of that and being able to kind of build a more custom workflow and it's harder at first, but easier as you keep going because it's more flexible. So we've been kind of moving more towards the AWS Media Live and kind of workflow. Next question.
Next question is kind of for Victor, and I don't see Victor in the panel. Did he take off? Peter Moore asks from Auckland, New Zealand. He says, or other audio people, have you used any native instruments hardware? I'm in need of a decent keyboard. And 2, have you used any of their software and plugins? So is there anybody else from the audio side of things who knows something about native instruments as a company? Doesn't look like it.
They have some really solid. Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff Francis had his hand up.
Yeah, I've used some of their sound module plugins there, and they're good. I'm pretty much a fan of Native Instruments.
Okay,
software.
I'll check it out tomorrow. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, Mickey's back.
Yeah, Native Instruments Complete is like one of the instrument packages you would expect any studio to have, like Waves, Mercury, like pretty much any like a higher end studio you'll expect them to have those. In terms of their controllers, Tractor seems to people seem to really like Tractor, like their DJ controller. Their keyboards not that much, but of course, like check it out and see if the weighting is good for you. I see more of the Novation keyboards, and of course like keyboards such as Nord's keyboards, which are they're actually electric pianos, but they have MIDI outs, and I see a lot of people use those in studios as well.
There you go.
Thanks, mate. I'll ping you on Discord. Thanks.
Okay, I think we covered it. Moving on to Greg Gibson, Washington, D.C., a Zoom audio sync question. If I'm capturing a presenter on Zoom, bringing that capture into vMix, repackaging it, and sending it back to an audience on Zoom, do I need to add negative audio delay to correct sync? So we'll give everybody a second to parse.
I guess the answer would be that it depends. Do you see it out of sync or not? You most likely, when you do that kind of pipeline, you're going to probably need to adjust sync, but it depends. And it's only if you separate your audio and your video from each other. So if you when you bring that person in from Zoom and you separate their audio to go through a separate audio chain, if you're doing that, then you need to, when they come back into the chain, they're going to need to, you're going to have to resync that. If the video and the audio stay together all the way through your chain, you shouldn't have to sync. Anyone else?
Yeah, we got Stuart in with a hand in the panel. Go ahead, Stuart, real
just
quick.
With vMix there, you're getting the Zoom input either through the NDI capture or like a screen scrape and whatever. The audio and the video will stay in sync, but you're going to end up with a delay going through the system and back out to Zoom. So it's more likely to affect how the person speaks and whether they're butting in on top of people like I do, because I'm using that sort of workflow. But the sync shouldn't drift between the audio and video. They should be the same from the source back out. But do be careful of feedback and loops, and you'll end up with echoes.
Okay, moving on to Peter Moore from Auckland, New Zealand. This looks like one for Alex. In Google Plus, you could see a directory of live Hangouts on air. Does the panel see Zoom or some third party offering something similar for people to just drop into?
Zoom has a new, I think it's in Zoom or on Zoom. They have a new certain thing that they're rolling out, which is basically that. You can sign up for things. You can see things that are upcoming and happening. I don't know exactly where that URL is, but I did look at it because but it's basically more of that event driven, like how do you, I think Zoom is trying to help become a directory for how those things occur.
Interesting. So, cool.
But it's like on Zoom or in Zoom or something like that. But it is something that they rolled out during Zoomtopia, where they talked about being, and it also gives you a place to put your Zooms up that people can, see them and sign up for them beyond just your own ability to promote it.
Okay. Sky wanted to pop in on it real quick, Sky.
Yes, I think it's called Zoom Go. And yes, I believe it is the virtual mall of the future. And I think so they're going to have the economy in there. I'm just thinking a virtual mall is the best example of what I could envision it. You can do everything
and you can,
there.
The good news is you can sign up and build a webinar or whatever without having to have a monthly subscription. You can say, I just want to do this on Zoom and pay for it at that moment, or process it. So it's a good idea.
That's nice. Roscoe has a quick, you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, I posted the link. It's called On Zoom.
On Zoom.
Yep. Okay, there you go.
Cool.
Moving to David Guzman of San Jose. Having a problem with my Yamaha 10XU mixer. It doesn't have enough gain for my Heil 40 or Countryman E6. I like the form factor of Cloudlifter and how it self-powers from phantom power. Would that work with a Heil, but would work for Heil, but not Countryman, which needs phantom power itself? Any ideas? Well, they do. There are little phantom power boxes that you can put in for any phantom power mic, but let's have Jeff and then Mickey weigh in.
So the Cloudlifter and the Triton Fethead are just inline amplifiers that give 20 or 25 dB of gain, and they're powered by phantom power. The Cloudlifter blocks that phantom power from getting to the mic, so it's only for dynamic and ribbons, but Triton Fethead does make a phantom power pass-through version. They make one that blocks phantom power, and they make another version that does pass phantom power, the Triton Fethead Phantom. I'll put a link in the chat.
So, was there somebody else who had a hand up? Mickey?
Jeff's got it.
Okay, took care of it. All right, fair enough. The next one I think we might have covered. I'll read it anyway. Thoughts on the new MacBook Pros for video editing. As a former Hollywood Final Cut Pro person, I'm liking everything I saw. It appears like they frog-leaped Intel performance thoughts. We kind of covered this, right? Do we want to go back to it? Let's just...
Just to underline it, I do think that I think over time, this is going to mean that Apple's performance related to video is going to be dramatically higher than most other options at the same price point. I think that we're actually going into a situation where Apple's going to be able to produce more power per dollar than almost anybody else because they're able to integrate all these things. There's a lot of, again, they're eliminating a lot of inefficiencies. So it's going to be pretty fast paced now over the next 2 or 3 years.
Hey, so Alex, real quick, what about like overheating and throttling? What are your thoughts on that? I'm thinking no, right?
I think that there'll be a lot less of that. When you don't move out through external systems, I think that, there's a lot of the heating issues, a lot of the, I think that, they're basically doing something that you can only do at Apple's size. There's probably, I don't know if there's any other company that could do what Apple's doing And that's the thing that makes it so lethal, is that you can see its efficiency, but I don't think anybody else, even if they saw it, could do what they're doing, and so, and it's because you own the hardware and the software and, the apps, and you can tie all those things together. They're taking, Apple's taking advantage of every step is taking advantage of the fact that they own the hardware, the entire pipeline, but they're building a very vertical market. I mean, I've said it in the past that I think that as we go into the next decade, Apple's biggest challenge is antitrust. It's not, it's that they are not leveraging it illegally, but they are leveraging their size and doing things that you just simply cannot do at a smaller size. And I can't project how someone can compete with what they're doing at the moment. Like that's because they own everything from the creation side all the way to the consumer side, and they're slowly fusing hardware and software into one unified pipeline. And that is, again, something that takes incredible scale and incredible investment and money. And it's not something that can be duplicated easily. And that's what you want to do as a company. You want to take advantage of of what your strong points are, but they're really taking advantage of them. And I think that's going to be it's going to be an interesting process over the next decade.
So we've got 3 questions and only about 2 minutes left to answer them.
Let's go.
Bob from Woodside says, I saw a bit of the mic check activity this morning. Can someone please talk about the strategy and levels you're seeking for Zoom calls and where you're measuring them? One person wants to take a shot at level setting? Mickey.
Sorry, strategy and you're seeking Zoom calls and where you're measuring them. Okay, so right now we're aiming for negative 24 LUFS on the meters. And I suggested that because AES recommendation for video that's distributed over the internet is for negative 24 LUFS for the integrated loudness. That means the loudness throughout the entire show. And I also suggested that because not many people, their systems aren't capable of hitting the loudness of negative 20 LEFS, which is what we were aiming for previously. What we're using to measure them is plug-in by Waves, which is called the WLM, Waves loudness meter.
Okay. Perry Miller of Chapel Hill. This one actually should take a longer time, but we don't have much. Please comment on Peaceful Cuisine, a YouTube cooking channel that delivers the content with rarely a spoken word and within a few minutes. The power of the videos is the use of ASMR, which is that very close sound, to capture the sounds of food preparation and cooking. Anybody want to really just comment quickly? Jeffrey Powers has his hand up. Just do something real quick.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it really quick. It looks like it's coming from possibly overseas here, and they're focusing on a multilingual audience. And of course, yeah, it's definitely using all the sounds that you hear rather than somebody explaining what's going on. And sounds and looks pretty cool. And they're using some pretty high-end stuff.
Nice.
To put together.
Yeah, I think that I don't think there's any reason to. You should, if you're able to clearly visualize something, you should be able to tell it without it. And to Jeffrey's point, making it available to internationally is an interesting thing.
Yeah. Mike Burns, finally, last question of the regular session. I have a quick story to tell about AirPod Pro replacement program, and I have one too, Mike, but you do yours real quick, and I'm going to do mine in 2 seconds. Whoops, you're not.
Okay, so quickly. Had to replace them. Apparently there's a quality control thing going on with them. But what blew my mind was, so the packaging, even the replacement, was gorgeous, right? But what they didn't explain to me is they actually send one at a time. So if you do have an issue, just know that they're going to send you one at a time, 2 separate packages. And I guess I'm assuming that's for theft and everything. But it kind of was very confusing because where's my other AirPod?
I went into the Apple store and they did a high level distancing and everything. It was a really nice experience. And I had one that was rattling. These are the first generation. I picked them up at Apple Park when we were there. And they took through the whole thing, tested both of them, were very careful, and replaced both of them without any charge at all. So it was simple. So if you have early AirPods and you have any issues at all, you can get them replaced. To do a great job. All right, we've made it to the top of the hour, which looks like it means, Alex, do you want to get us set up for the?
Yeah. So we're going to shift gears. I'm going to talk. This is, and I want to underline, this is just an introduction conversation to Vision. So this is Dolby Vision. We've heard a lot about it from Apple in the last little bit of time. The new, most of the phones sold in the last, I think the Apple phones sold in the last year and a half, I believe, or 2 years, have been capable of displaying, or the last year have been capable of displaying Vision. Some of the new iPads can display Vision. Newer laptops can display Vision. So Apple has been kind of doubling and tripling down on the Vision solution, and I believe that it really is the best solution. It's the hardest solution, but the best solution of the process. And our goal is to, I think that there's going to be a big opportunity. As I said yesterday with Atmos, I think that there is a unique opportunity for our group to get ahead of everyone else as we learn more about this. So this is kind of getting us on the playing field, kind of setting up the, what it's going to look like. But what you're going to see us work on a lot over the next 2 or 3 months are picking out certain areas that I think could benefit us as creators, where we can, a lot of my business over the last 15 years has been go find places not where everybody is already, but where there's nobody there. There's not a lot of crowd. It's dangerous, and there's still wolves and there's still other things, but there's not a lot of people that I have to compete with. And so I think there's an opportunity right now for us as a group to get out there and be able to, provide unique solutions for clients, because we really understand these other technologies. And so those, some of the technologies that I'm particularly interested in, that I've said in the past, just to kind of keep on underlying the group of things that I'm looking at, are e-learning and online, obviously online events, but also AR as it rolls out, as well as Vision in Atmos. So those are some of the things that I'm really focusing on, is how do we make sure that our group really gets good at it, not just, we kind of know what it is, but over the next 2 or 3 months really understands it and really digs deep. And so we're going to spend a lot of time working with all of you, or at least giving you the opportunity to learn this stuff. And I would highly recommend spending a little extra effort on learning these things. And we hope to bring some experts in. I don't want to have the experts come in and have us not even know which way is up. So this first hour is just there to kind of walk people through the Vision, conversation, and really understand, what it is, and why it's important. And, hopefully we're more ready for bringing some higher level folks in to have some more detailed conversations with us. The thing what Vision is it's part of the kind of the HDR group of things that are there. And just as a really quick overview, you have, obviously standard definition, or not standard definition, but standard dynamic range, which is usually defined as 100 nits. Nits is a measurement of brightness. So 0 to 100 nits is the standard, the brightness there, and it really never gets down to 0. That's part of the problem with standard dynamic range, is that you don't really get real blacks. And then as you go up, you can get, when you're dealing with typical HDR10 and HLG, you're talking about 1,000 nits, which is 10 times the dynamic range that you had with standard dynamic range. Dolby Vision theoretically goes up to 10,000 nits. Now, most of what it's doing right now is 4,000 nits. There's no screens that I've seen so far that I've had the opportunity to be in front of that are 10,000 nits, but I can tell you that 4,000 nits causes your irises to contract. And even at 1,000 nits, you'll start to, when something really bright hits a big screen in front of you, it's a different experience, because your eyes actually start to, contract down, because there's so much light coming in, which you don't usually have with TV. So you don't think about it that way, but you don't really have that much brightness. You kind of adjust to it internally. So the big advantage of high dynamic range is that you're really getting not just brighter brights, but darker darks. You're getting real blacks. If you have an OLED monitor, you'll see black is black, like it's just pure black. And then but even and especially on your new iPhones and iPads, you're going to see those really dark rich blacks, as well as these hyper whites. And so it creates a much richer image, and most people will argue that it has more of an impact on how we view the image than resolution, especially on our little screens. And I will say from experience, of most of my work is now dealing with Vision or HDR. And when you get used to looking at it, everything looks gray. And I think that's why I think there's a market opportunity for a lot of us, is that with the iPhone 12 Pro, you're going to have lots and lots of people out there that are shooting Vision all the time and looking at it on their phone, and their eyes are going to adjust. So there'll be tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions of people that before they were kind of at Best Buy and they didn't really understand why HDR is a big deal and, well, it looks a little better. They're going to get to a point where their TVs at home and their shows that they're watching, just feel less than, and there's an opportunity for us to, there's not enough experts to solve these problems. And so anyway, what you want to think about is that dynamic range stretching, basically much more clearly describing that scene, the real, getting closer to the real brightness that we see in the real world, and things looking a lot more realistic. Now, what Dolby distinguishes itself, there's basically three major groups of high dynamic range. There's HLG, there's HDR10, and then there is Dolby Vision. And then there's a subset of HDR10, which is HDR10 plus. The HLG was really designed as a way that European and British broadcasters wouldn't have to make everybody get new television sets. And so it carries kind of like, in the same way that back in the day when we started adding color, we wonder why we have YUV. A color broadcast actually will broadcast black and white as well. So the luminance is all at one channel. It's not, because if they did RGB color, you would have to get new TV. Everyone would have had to get new TVs to watch it on their black and white sets. Because they did all the luminance in one channel and then had color on the other two channels, they were able to, number one, scale those color. That's why we have 422. But they were also able to send one signal out, and the older TVs would only see the black and white information. In the same way, HLG, the standard definition's there, and then there's, if you have an HLG capable device, you'll be able to see more dynamic range. And I say more because HLG is pretty much the lesser than, it's a huge compromise. And so you don't get the kind of dynamic range or detail that you could get in other solutions. HDR10 is another setup where you have more control. The thing you have to understand is dealing with these, all available light, and we have to define what part of that available light we're going to take. So HDR10 across an entire project will have these are the highs and the lows and the mids, and here's the gamma and so on and so forth for that entire project. And typically HDR10 is limited to 1,000 nits. It doesn't always have to be, but that tends to be where it lives. What Dolby Vision does is it says we can add trims. We can add the brightness levels of that, the high and lows, and all the different color trims to every single frame. So in every frame we can analyze the best way to display this on the TV. On the other side of that, just like we talked about Atmos yesterday, if you've got stereo, it plays out stereo. 5.1, it plays out 5.1. 7.1, it plays out 7.1. With Dolby, it says I have this, I've got 4,000 nits, but you bought a 1,000 nit TV. What Dolby Vision can do is say, well, I know that TV can only do 1,000 nits, so it gives it a 1,000 nit output to play out. Now, if you go buy a 4,000 nit TV, congratulations, that's a great TV. It's really expensive, but congratulations that you have a 4,000 nit TV. Dolby Vision will just expand that. You don't have to have another output that goes out to that, and so it as with Atmos grows with whatever system you put into it. It continues to, you can master once and then deliver to a lot of those devices, and those devices, as the consumer buys a better device, they'll get a better experience. The challenges, of course, with Vision right now, especially as it pertains for VOD, it's pretty straightforward. You can master it in, you can master it in Resolve. There's rumored to be more support for Vision in Final Cut next week, is the rumor. Apple has definitely promised it by the end of the year. But right now, most of us are using Resolve to do the mastering for those things. The real challenge is the pipeline. So if you're doing it in a live environment, which is what I'm working on is, or doing HDR in a live environment, is passing data, through that, through the system, because there's no way to pass it through an SDI signal frame by frame. So those are the things that we're kind of challenged with at the moment. But once you see it, and once you start to get used to it, it becomes very, very addicting. It's just a much more rich experience than what you're used to. And again, because Dolby is not controlling, but really empowering the pipeline all the way from the creator and the acquisition to the end user, it allows the creators, as they start to work on it, they're able to add all those trims and make sure that that image looks exactly the way they want it. And vision capable devices on the other side are going to show that video in the way that the creators intended for them to see it. And that's a pretty unique, setup where, and it's really, you have to own the whole pipeline to make that work. And that's what Dolby's been, kind of working on. So does anyone, I can't see anyone, so I don't know if anyone else has their hand up or if we just want to jump.
Chris Fenwick and Sky have their hands up, and now Alex 4D too. So Chris, go ahead.
So Alex, the question I have for you is there, one of the things that we talk about with Dolby Vision is the brightness and the dynamic range. I was about a year ago in Vegas at an event doing a big giant screen, and I was talking with the video engineer, and he said that he had to give a control to the lighting guy, so the lighting guy could adjust the overall brightness of the LED wall. It was about a 200-foot wide LED wall in Vegas, and super bright. He said they were actually running it at approximately 3% brightness. Does that help us when it comes to being able to author things in Dolby Vision, that there are projection systems out there that are as bright as this?
Yeah, I mean, well, for LED walls, it's pretty typical for us to turn those LED walls way down, because the cameras, but when people are watching these shows in high dynamic range, it will mean that eventually you will be able to turn those screens up. And I have to say that I've done tests where we are shooting LED walls, and they are stunning. Like when they're allowed to run free, when your LED wall, because a lot of what you're doing with an LED wall is you're lowering that brightness way, way down so that the lights can keep up with the person in the foreground. And you'll still have to, there's still some of that challenge, but a lot of it is so that the wall doesn't blow out, because in a little standard dynamic range, you can only get so far. As HDR becomes more of a thing, you can get more of the experience of the person on the, on that sitting in the audience gets, which is that it can manage that dynamic range more effectively. And LED walls are some of the more impressive things to see in high range, because they are capable of really pushing against the cameras, to give them a full dynamic range, where a lot of what we do in lighting, like even if you go out and shoot a sunset, you go out and shoot, if you play with a let's say a Blackmagic 6K, and you play with your LUTs and you look at what it's going towards. If you put it into 709, everything's all clipped. You put it into PQ, or you put it into a extended video or film, and suddenly everything's not clipped, because that dynamic range is still being captured, and so that is, that we're going to be able to see things in a much, as we start to use vision more and more, see much more detail across it. The stuff that I was shooting in Bodega Bay on Sunday, it was white highlights across the ocean, dark stone in front of me, rocks, and there's detail in all of it. Like there's not, one's not blown out and the other one's not there, and it's just a much richer image. And so with LED walls, but with many scenes, there's so many places where we've been using ND filters, doing all kinds of other things. We're going to use some of that, but the point is all these things we have to do to tone map everything back down, or to pull it in, because we only have 100 nits to work with. HDR in general is going to allow us to extend that, further out, and then vision on top of that gives us the fine tuning control to really get the most out of every image.
At first, I thought I was going to go out and order a T-shirt that said "Unleash the Nits." Then I thought, no, maybe that's not a good idea. Sky's next.
Good.
So kind of two questions. So
OLED, you're
echoing
all over the place.
There's two of you. Yeah, there's two of you.
Your audio chain is weird.
Thank you.
Alex
OLED.
Gollner, and while you fix it, we'll go to Alex.
I've changed nothing.
it's echoing. It's two of you. Go ahead, Alex.
Alex, you need to unmute.
Yes, sorry about that. So yeah, what I find interesting about Dolby Vision, weirdly enough, is for dealing with the fact that we don't have the perfect display yet. You know, if I film something on a very sunny day in a darkened store or like a cafe, and there's very dark shadows and people talking in those dark shadows, but there's lots of sunlight coming in from outside, that's always a big problem in terms of dealing with the fact that even celluloid will have problems with that kind of dynamic range. So the idea is to make it so the artistic intention of me as the person about how to make that store look like on that day, my artistic intention, I want that to survive the distribution process. So what Dolby Vision is and Dolby Atmos is are subsets of what I would call object-oriented media, whereas maybe in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, we're going to throw people, with a production, we'll throw people a few hundred clips of audio and video and maybe other stuff, and it's a database that they'll play back, and then their playback device will have all the metadata it needs about every single piece of audio and video and know how to play it back on whatever display device is being used, even to the extent that if it's on an LED wall and they turn the brightness down, then the artistic intention of the creator will go, oh, okay, I've got less dynamic range to deal with. I now know how to change the relative balance of the darker parts and the brighter parts to match, because I know how many nits are going to be used to actually display this. So it can actually be dynamically changed at the playback point, because what we've been doing over the last 120 years is we're moving the compositing device closer to the actual viewer. It used to be that the editor would composite it and edit it together, and then we'd do a one light kind of celluloid, and then on the TV we'd be like, well, we know how limited TVs are to be able to show these things, and we have to bake in our decisions too early on. But now we don't have to bake any of the decisions in to fake these things, like in the case of reverb, in the case of Dolby Atmos, in order to give the feeling of stereo or space. We don't have reverb, it's not baked in, it's done at playback depending on what room it's being played in. So we're kind of, this is a subset of what's going to be the future of media over the next 5 years, of dealing with object-oriented media and all the metadata associated with original source files. I know that's a bit, maybe not for this discussion, but yeah, that's why I like Dolby Vision.
One of the things that's important is that we, as creators, as we start to work through this, is to really think about is future-proofing some of what we're doing, because in thinking about things like Dolby Vision, where we can master something that we know will last for a long time. If you look at 80s sitcoms or 80s action, even like the A-Team or something like that from the 80s, they shot that all and they mastered it in 4:3 standard definition, because that's what it's just a show. Why spend the extra money? But in syndication, in all these other things, it's less than, because it didn't have, for the folks that shot in film, for instance, they were able to go back and remaster a lot of these, or have the originals that were all shot, in 16:9 and 4:3 or 16:9 and then cropped to 4:3 and those types of things. And they have that original data, from the 70s and 80s. And so when we think about creating these, and we think we might have something that we want to keep, number one is there's now a huge market there, which there wasn't before. And someone's got an open mic. There was, before this fall, there was a very limited, output of people who had the ability to watch Vision or to acquire Vision. There was a growing number. There's hundreds of millions of people that now have Vision capable devices on their iPhones. Their iPhone 11s are all able to see Vision, but we weren't able to acquire it. And so now everybody can acquire it. And so that is going to make a big difference in how many people see it all day, every day. And I think that, so number one is there's an opportunity for us to have our stuff look better. And remember, we're not just talking about, you may have consumers that don't notice it, that it's HDR. It really is about a feeling of this is better than everything else. And the average consumer is not going to know, but if there's some surround going around them, and if there's this really rich colors, they're going to feel like this is higher quality. It's a subconscious thing. This is a higher quality solution than what they've seen before. And I think that that's the opportunity for us, is to subtly add these things that have the consumer feel like it's a better piece of content. And when they feel like that, they're more likely to watch it longer and be more engaged in it when they feel immersed, either visually or auditorily.
Let's see if Sky's fixed his audio, then we'll go to Guy Cochran for the close.
Test one, test two.
Nope.
Oh my
You're good.
gosh.
Guy, you're up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the cool things about going to CES this year was getting to see Sony's booth where they had the crystal LED display, and they were talking about Resolve being used in Hollywood studios with this crystal display because the contrast ratio was like 1,000,000 to 1. And so when you jump over to their site, and I'll put a link, you could where they show. Let me go ahead and hit play here. They show, just HDR and some of the demos and how it's put together. But this was $1 million wall for 16 feet, $1 million. So getting to go to some of these shows is what I miss, is seeing this stuff where they had a demo which had some flames, and you could feel, like psychologically, you could feel the heat. It was so crisp, so sharp, so real that when they displayed fire, you felt like you needed to move back because
actually that is heat. Those walls can get kind of hot.
I know that when what I thought was interesting, Sony had the same wall up in NAB, the last NAB that we all went to, and they were showing 8K 120 frame per second HDR output. And when it was full frame for me, when I got close enough to the screen where I couldn't see the edges, when they moved the camera, when they did like a big like jib shot down, my stomach actually pulled in. I literally realized that for my brain, I couldn't distinguish that as a wall anymore. It was just a window into something else, and that's why I think that as we keep on looking at these at high dynamic range, at higher frame rate, at higher resolutions, we're going to get pretty close to a different type of content that is more of a window experience. I don't think that film at 2398, whatever, doing what it's doing will go away. But I think that there's another experience coming, which is this kind of window, what I would call a window experience, where you just really feel like your reality. And I think that Vision is a piece of that puzzle.
Let's see if Sky's third time lucky, and then Jason, and then Stuart.
Okay, we're going to yell at the laptop.
There you go.
Okay,
that works.
Horrible. I changed nothing. That's weird. So I'm working in a colorist house in Burbank. When HDR came out, the concept of what I understood, it was explained, it's better pixels, not more pixels. And so as you're describing this, I'm almost envisioning a concept. It's become in the shadow world, it's the Z depth that we're starting to experience.
Yeah, it's a depth, it's a deeper pixel.
And in shadow, of course, is how we experience a two-dimensional media into a three-dimensional, psychology, shadows and all that stuff that we learn. So I'm starting to really grab so the other question I had was, if a frame of 1920 or say 4K video is 8 pixel or 8K, how much is a single frame of this experience with all of its new Z-depth metadata?
To get that, it's really a matter of the metadata itself is very small. What is required is that you have 10 or preferably 12 bits per pixel. So right now, so when we go into 8 bits per pixel, you want to have 10 bits or 12 bits per pixel. And the reason for that is that if you think of gradations between it, when you see posterization in an 8-bit image, a lot of us will go to a higher bit image, 16-bit in Photoshop, for instance, to get better gradients. And the reason that that's the case is that I have to, in 8 bits, I have to cover a gradient that goes from this brightness across the image to this brightness. And I only so many gray levels to describe that. And so what happens is when I don't have enough, you see stair stepping, and we call that posterization, right? We see when we see posterization, banding. When we see banding, it's because I only had this gray level to this. It was a very subtle change from this brightness to this brightness. These are two the same, but I had to cover that subtle change. I had, let's say, 10 grays across RGB to cover this distance, and I had to stretch each one of them out. As you add as you go to 10-bit, you have that many more grays. As you go to 12-bit, as you add those bits, you have more levels of gray you can get from here to here over a long distance. And so you can see that banding, because that banding is in the RGB, it is, I don't have enough grays, I don't have enough numbers to get from this slightly brighter one. You can, it's not when it's really contrasty, it's in the subtle areas, where in that 8-bit image, you'll see that I just didn't have enough grays to get there. So I had to make one go across and then drop down another one. With the 10-bit, I have more grays to just more grays in each channel to describe that color change. And in 12-bit, you have more. And so the reason that's important is because we're taking those images and we're stretching them a lot further. So as we stretch that out and add more color detail, you start to need more. You're stretching that process out, and you need more bits to describe the color. So it's really, and it doesn't turn out to be twice as much to have 10-bit or 12-bit. It is heavier, but that's what part of what makes the ability to take that content and stretch it out possible.
Okay, we've got. Do you want to go through Jason and Stuart, who had their hands up? Jason, go ahead, and then Stuart.
In the same, the best way I could describe it is that when your vocabulary becomes enriched, it's not a singular thing. It's not like you're using a word. It's the word and all the relationships to the word. So to that end, every step up is not we have a few more things. It's everything builds 2 to the X faster when it comes to the description. So for example, a 10-bit would be 1.07 billion colors, while 8-bit is 16.7 million. Like, that is an order of magnitude difference. So don't think of bits as this linear thing. It simply isn't. And with that, I've got to drop off. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye, Jason. See you tomorrow. Stuart's up next.
Just back to the video wall that Alex was talking about before, and I know this is going to upset Mr. Fenwick. At what sort of resolution would we need to reach on a 360-degree camera to be able to have a fully encompassing LED wall for a virtual reality experience?
The answer is all the resolutions.
No, so it's also what you can see and what the wall is capable of. It depends on, so a lot of that will depend on also what the resolution of the wall is, or what's the pitch of the wall. Is it a 3.2, 2.8, 0.9, 1.7? All of those things are going to make a difference, and whether the audience can actually see it. We've definitely worked on projects where it may not be 360, but the wall, it also depends on how big that wall is. But a lot of the resolutions that we're talking about are, and we haven't gone domed, we've just gone all the way across. But I think that the highest resolution that we worked at, which was not all the way around, it was probably 180 degrees, was in the 30,000 plus pixel range wide. So and that takes multiple processors that are overlapped and everything else. And so those are the, that tends to be, it just depends on what that resolution is. A lot of the stuff looks pretty good though at 11 to, or 10 to 15,000 pixels is a pretty good resolution that will look pretty good across those frames. And we've definitely done full all the way around.
Yeah, Sky, and then Alex 4D.
Well, Stuart, to your point, IMAX, of course, their concept was how wide did they have to get to immerse you in a seated experience? And so with the 360, and since we're not going into theaters anymore, you bring up a good point of, is AR the solution versus an IMAX or a video wall? And I was also very curious, Guy, when you were showing that, what is the density of those diodes? Because that, of course,
0.3 millimeter or 0.03 millimeter pitch on those, where normally like some of these big jumbotron looking ones are 1 millimeter and
exactly
and
my
half millimeter.
point.
Those determine how tight.
0.3?
It's at 0.3.
Yeah, that's a huge calculation issue. But again, a lot of that will blur together. I could put a really crappy JPEG up on a big screen, and it all, by the time it gets to me 70, 80 feet away, it kind of blurs. So this is interesting calculations.
Alex, then Stuart, then Chris.
So from the 360 video world, the rough approximation is that 8K around in 360 will give you an HD experience through your glasses, right? So essentially you're getting roughly HD through your glasses as you turn, because you're spreading out that 8K, that's based on your field of view. So that's why 16K is probably going to be okay, because you're going to effectively getting 4K into your eyes at 120 degrees field of view of your actual eyes. So really going above 16K from strictly speaking is like the difference between HD and 4K. Depends how big your room is. So more than 16K you're probably not going to need in general if you just want to do a very rough spec of it. But obviously there's in big rooms, you've got people that's closer to some parts of the screen. So if you're in a room that's 200 meters wide, but you've got somebody who's only about 5 meters for one part of that screen, then you may want to increase the resolution.
Stuart?
I'm actually thinking a little bit smaller scale than what Alex was just suggesting there. And noting the link that Guy just posted for a company that makes really nice projectors reminded me of what it was like in the 90s, sitting in the lounge room with a 12 by 8 screen and a Barco 3-gun projector, playing X-Wing v TIE Fighter using multiple joysticks and doing the trench run across the Death Star at 4 times speed. It was a lot of fun, but that sort of experience and immersion now with LED walls would be great. Put your helmet on, sit in your Starfighter or race Formula One cars.
Well, and to your point, though, I think that flight simulators and all kinds of other stuff are going to benefit from from this type of thing. I think that you could see, and there are games starting to really, look at Dolby Vision, and I think that people being able to play, I'd be curious to see whether Microsoft's flight simulator or other ones took advantage of HDR, because you had a couple of those screens going around you. With the realism of the renders so far, I think you get into something that looks pretty real. It's really interesting. Next question.
Oh, well, Chris Fenrick had his hand up for a long time.
Go ahead, Chris.
You okay?
Chris.
Okay, then we'll move on. Our first question in Vision specific, with mini LED around the corner and its ability to cruise past 1,000 nits and color accurate processing getting better, how will this disrupt the small group of mastering monitors currently available?
Well, I think that we're going to get more and more mastering monitors. I think that's a good. I get emails from manufacturers in China all the time, like, "Hey, do you want to test a new monitor, or you want to buy a new monitor?" Mostly, and so I think that we're going to see the price of 4,000, 2,000, even and 1,000 nit monitors drop dramatically. Getting the accuracy up is the challenge. And what I will say is that while we test on a lot of different monitors, the one that I trust the most is my iPhone. like we find that the iPhone and the iPad are the two most Apple has spent. If you turn everything else off, they're the most accurate monitors that we get from a color perspective. Apple spent a lot of time and money on it, and we haven't seen any significant difference from reference monitors. As far as except for the reference monitors that go significantly above 1,000 nits.
Plus, it has the most eyeballs out there in the actual marketplace. So that's
you always have to look at, you want to be looking at reference. You always want to be looking at your reference monitors to make sure that you're getting what you think you're getting. But on the other side of that, you also need to make sure that you are watching it on on a device that the consumers are going to be watching it on too. I know that with the Stag Theater at the Ranch, they had to add sound effects back in to replicate other things going on in the theater because it was so quiet. You'd put in subtlety that you could never hear in a theater. So they had to kind of figure out how to manage that. Anyway, next question.
Jonas Dotel of Reutlingen has actually two in a row here. Vision, I have a GH5. It can shoot HLG HDR. Can I convert that into Dolby Vision? Is his first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you're going to probably have some options to do that in Final Cut, and then Resolve. You can definitely bring it in and then add. You're basically taking that data and mapping it to a wider range with Vision, and that definitely can be done.
Alex has something he wants to kick in on that.
So yeah, weirdly enough, you could say that Dolby Vision up until a few weeks ago, was making SDR grading look better from HDR content. So you have your HDR content, however you've shot it, using whatever cameras, and it was a process that you applied a bit of software and in Resolve to say, okay, analyze all these shots individually and produce the metadata so that you will produce a good trim. And there was a variation on what that data is to make it look good when it's in SDR or looks good on 100 nit monitors. So that's what it used to be. So that's why you can do that now with any sort of camera that's got a good dynamic range. It's just what's new now is the fact that people have got these monitors in their pockets and also the ability to shoot this footage, and the process for getting those trims is going to be built into more wide-ranging software. So yeah, it's weirdly enough that way around.
So Jonas's second question is there a streaming platform that can do HDR?
There's not a publicly available streaming platform yet that can do HDR. So it's, I mean, there's broadcasters that are starting to incorporate in Europe, and we're probably going to see more of that in the US as far as distribution goes. But as far as streaming goes, I think that we're going to see that over the next 18 months. But right now we don't know of any other publicly available streaming platforms. There's some custom ones, obviously, that can do it.
Stuart, then Chris. Stuart?
Just something along the lines of, say, uploading HDR footage to YouTube. Wouldn't there be an easy way for Dolby to have like a flag on a video that when it's being played at somebody's computer and what have you, you see the flag and the player just goes to HDR?
Well, it's
I'm
a matter
not
of supporting
explaining the
vision.
question right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of the platform, whatever that platform is, supporting vision. And right now, YouTube doesn't support that yet.
Chris Fenwick?
So Alex, we kind of went down a rat hole for a while talking about 8K and resolution and stuff. Two quick questions. One, does Dolby Vision have any parameters for what the resolution needs to be, or is it primarily the HDR?
It's just the color. It's the HDR.
So if you had a choice between watching stuff in 4K or watching stuff at 1080 Dolby Vision HDR, which would you choose?
1080 Dolby Vision every day. I mean, you can't. The 4K is impressive, but at a certain distance, can you resolve it? Like you really have to be close enough to the monitor size and everything else. Can you visually resolve 4K versus 1080?
That's what I was going to say earlier, that when we talk about resolution, there's three numbers that are important. It's the size of the screen, the number of pixels, and the third number that a lot of people stop talking about is viewing distance.
Right.
And
I mean, like for instance, at home, and I am considering it, but at home, at the distance that I sit from my living room TV, to truly get 4K, I would need a 75 or 80 inch TV, and right now I have a 65. And so while I can see 4K, I mean, it's not, but color makes a big difference, but that's the thing, is color you're going to see from across the room, and so I think that the dynamic range is way more important than the resolution.
We have Alex and Sky with their hands up. So quickly, Alex and Sky.
Sky put his hand up first, so Sky next.
Okay, go Sky.
Again, when I worked in Los Angeles, the difference between a 4K and a 2K was imperceptible in a large screening room. So it's tomato.
Alex?
So when you've got 8 bits per channel, if you go up to 10 bits a channel, that's 4 times as much range. If you go to 12 bits per channel, that's 16 times as much range. But the bandwidth that's been used to stream that to you or to come off your disk or hard drive or SSD is not that many more pixels. That's the cool thing. We're using the same bandwidth holes that we've got at the moment, but we're doing much more with them because it makes much more sense to use those bits for color and brightness variation than it is to do pixel variation, because we can't see the difference between two adjacent pixels, but we can certainly see the adjacent between two adjacent brightnesses or color. So those bits, that bandwidth, fixed bandwidth, is much better used for color and brightness.
Okay, moving on. Eric Hall of Mount Vernon, Washington says, how does vision translate to the quality of printed media? I guess that starts with what kind of printed media. An 85-line screen newspaper is a whole different level than Chrome Coat magazine printing on a web press for a fashion mag like Glamour or Elle or one of those, which is very high resolution. So can this be mapped? Is there any way to tell how it compares, Alex? 4D?
I mean, I would say, because I used to do magazine design in the late 80s, early 90s, I would say that really the resolution you have in fashion magazines is only somewhere between HD and 4K from our perspective when it comes down to it, because we used to have 133 lines per inch. In other words, that was the actual distance between the dots that you would have in order to display CMY and K in your print. And now and then it went up to 200, but never went above that. But that's actually pretty low resolution compared with 4K. So that helps in terms, that's the resolution side of it. Color-wise, I don't know. I think the way the printing works is probably improved a little bit over the years, because we have to kind of deal with the K side of things, the black part of it.
CMYK rather than RGB.
Yeah. And it's so it's kind of, yeah. But anyway, maybe we shouldn't go there. I would say that the same source of media, the idea would be that Dolby Vision would have a different output profile for each thing that you have. So you'd have one for the phone, but you could also have one for different kinds of print if you wanted to. So that's, but with the same source. And we're talking about making the same, preparing the source properly for any kind of output.
I think our Alex wants to weigh in on this.
Alex, to that point, that's where those pixels that guy were showing were a CMYK, not an RGB, and that's why I was.
Well, I don't think that reflective media is competitive at this point. Like, compared to print can't really compete with from a brightness or color perspective at this point. As we go into this kind of hyper rich experience on these phones, I think that and again, I don't think print is going away. I think that there's still some use for it, but I think that we're going to keep moving where the primary, our primary delivery tool is going to be our tablets and our phones and our computers, and not. I think that the days of us, I spend most days without any printed material. like it's and even when I'm at something, if someone wants to hand me something, I'm like, oh, I don't want to store that.
You can turn up additive displays. You can't turn up subtractive display paper.
Well, and I also think when we look at print, just because content creators haven't been able to integrate text with video and 3D very well to date. I think that when that code gets cracked, and it's something that we'll talk about, because I view that as part of like e-learning, we're going to see more and more and more of that. It's just that there's just not a lot of good examples yet. Anyway, next
Fenwick
question.
had a question, then Stuart did, but Fenwick, you want to get
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple of days ago, I started to read something to my wife off my phone, and she turned on a light for me. I said, "What are you doing?" "I'm staring into a light. I don't really need a lamp on right now."
Right.
Stuart?
Chris, you should always have some background light to protect your eyes. But just a reminder that dark mode for print is very expensive, and we've all done it once.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Charles Klein of New York City Vision. What are the different challenges of an HDR live production versus an HDR post-production? Alex, you want to dive in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is that you with post-production, you can sit there and figure out how you're going to contract, all the stuff into the space that you're dealing with. When you're dealing with it live, you have to do that in real time, and it's just a much bigger space. It's like you went from working in like the SDR was like this little hotel room, like what I'm in right now, and it's like going from that into a giant arena of color and light and bright, and so you have to really think through that process. And then some of the other integration challenges relate to how do you handle playback media. The playback media is going to have its own gammas and its own setup and its own, so you have to be very careful about how you deal with that. How do you deal with the graphics and the compositing? Those are other things that can be challenging in this environment, as you pass those through. So those are, getting all of your pieces of these wide gamuts, to that are highly definable, into the same space is, probably one of the biggest challenges of doing a live production. And again, you can make it look dramatically different and wrong really, really quickly. And so you go back to the creators creating it to look a certain way, and they have, when it was a very small box being 100 nits, it was easy to say, okay, well, that's what I want it to look like. And it just looks like that as it goes through. When it's so much larger, their little adjustments can make big changes to how it looks.
Okay. Sky, you had your hand up.
I continue to think like the difference between the 4 crayons you get at a restaurant or the box of 64 that you get with all of the nuanced colors is the best description. But my curiosity is, as you're talking, the ASUS workflow is still in debate amongst the SMPTE and the colorist world that I still kind of hang out in. And so I'm curious where the ASUS situation is in this conversation.
We'd have to bring them in to talk about it. I'm not as familiar with, I haven't had to deal with that pipeline yet.
Okay.
Well, they've been discussing this for years. So that would be a
we'll get them in
good
here.
resource.
It sounds like a good second hour. Yep.
Absolutely. Roscoe Jones is in with, do you underexpose when shooting HDR to keep the details in the highlights? That's the old exposed to the left for photography.
Well, you still keep it within the gamut. And so usually you're displaying that in your camera as to, what you're, definitely using a false color, which is basically a lookup table against, your brightnesses. You're definitely always paying attention, no matter what you're doing, to keep it inside of that gamut, knowing that if you're shooting, for instance, when you're shooting for post or whatever, you're working in a log pipeline, and in that log pipeline, you're keeping it there, knowing that you can reevaluate that down the path. In live, it's a little bit more complicated. So you have to, figure out what those high points are, because your dynamic range, while very high, is less than log. so you're then building a lookup table for that. What's interesting about that I'm experimenting with right now is the live tools inside of Resolve allow you to take a camera and have it pipe in live into Resolve, and then in your color window, you're able to go into it and build your look on that camera. It's the raw output from the camera. That log output, is going into Resolve Live. You build the look that you want, then you can save that as a cube and then load it back into the camera. The camera puts out what you wanted to put out. So there's a lot of interesting controls there that we're doing a lot of experiment with right now to kind of build that pipeline so that the camera lives inside of that. But it's not that you shoot low, you shoot within your range, I guess is what I would say. And you do have to have a way to display that while you're shooting, to know, at least from false colors, if not the actual image. If you're shooting in HDR, you need to see it in HDR while you're shooting so you can see what's going on.
Stuart has a follow-up. Stuart, go.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to give the cinematographer's point of view. What you expose, what you blow out, it's creative choice. But from what I'm hearing and seeing with the Dolby Vision, it's going to be a lot easier to keep the part of the image that a cinematographer wants the viewer to focus on, keep that correctly exposed.
Well, the big problem that a lot of cinematographers had when we first started shooting video that drove them crazy, when they go into video, is that the 100 nit, that standard dynamic range was so small. It was this tiny little target that they had to hit all the time on set. And people say, well, they just have to get better. They have to get more technical. Well, kind of, but then when you have all the things that happen on a set, having to figure out how to fit into a postage stamp compared to what film was able to give them was really difficult. Now we're getting back to, they have that full gamut that they can kind of work with. And even with an HDR pipeline, the HDR pipeline is fine, but we still want to capture that log data locally on the camera. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Mickey has his hand up.
Yeah, from my understanding with shooting other films that are shot in HDR, not necessarily delivered in Dolby Vision, but distributed in HDR, nothing really changed in terms of how you expose, because essentially, like as Stuart mentioned, sometimes you have to give up some things to the shadows or to the highlights, blow them out, or crush the blacks if it's too dark. But with HDR, it just opens it up. You can salvage more in the highs and the lows. But you also have to keep in mind that at the moment, we still have to deliver an SDR. So, in terms of the mindset of when it comes to exposure, expose as you've been doing for SDR. It's just when you do your HDR grade, you have more to play with.
Okay, I think we are moving on to the second to the last question. Mixing in Atmos, are the tools readily available, and what are the recommendations for audio mixing in Atmos?
Mickey, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, pretty much any DAW that could use AU, AAX, VST plugins can be used to mix in Atmos. There, Dolby has a plugin called Dolby. For some reason they call it the the Atmos Music Panner, and that allows any of these DAWs to link to the Atmos renderer. Now, at the moment, the Pro Tools and Resolve, as we saw, have native support for Atmos. But again, like with that plugin, any DAW can be used. Even GarageBand, if you want, because you can take an AU plugin into GarageBand.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
No, that'd be interesting to try to do an Atmos mix in GarageBand just for the fun of it. But,
so we only have one more general question, but we had a couple of questions that were left back in the thing. I don't know, Alex, whether you want me to go ahead and do those after this or not. But let's get to the last, which is a really nice closing question. What's the basic kit recommendations we need to dive into the world of Dolby Vision and Atmos?
I mean, what I would say to start with is in the very beginning of it would be Resolve and an iPhone 12. I think those are the two things that you could do a lot with. You'd be adding effects with those. I mean, from there you can keep on adding things. You can get better cameras, you can get more mics, you can get more sound effects, you can do a lot more there. But I think that those are probably the most straightforward things. I mean, the things that I'm playing with is obviously Resolve, but also Logic, and figuring out how to build music beds and so on and so forth in Atmos is something that I'm kind of toying with at the moment. But I think that those are the two pieces that you need. And if you go to something like a 6K camera, you're going to have a lot more data to work with and so on and so forth. But I think that those are pretty good places to get started. Anyone else? I can't see anybody.
No, I think there's no more hands up for the regular stuff. We can move on to the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, and all I'd say to finish that off is that we are going to posting some test data in the soon future. so as the Resolve 17 comes out into beta and lets people play with it, I'm going to shoot some stuff that we can just use as a group, so you guys can play with it and we can talk about it and we can, and we'll post some resources of where you can download some raw footage. So even if you don't have the ability to acquire it right now, we're going to work on getting you footage that you can go in and take it into Resolve and play with it and take some other examples in. And so we're going to be posting some of those resources over the next couple of weeks to get you started. And the idea also is not only that you can play with it, but that all of us are playing with the same footage at the same time, which I think is going to be very important as we all learn this together.
Sky has a hand up at the end here.
Go ahead, Sky.
Is DaVinci 17 available? And
I don't think it's shipped. I don't think it's up yet.
Oh, John is saying it is, or he's nodding his head.
Yeah, I have it right now. I have it loaded.
And
I didn't see it. I didn't see it uploaded. Maybe it's just in their software updates. I was looking for it on the front page, but is it the beta?
Oh, yeah, it's the beta.
Yeah. Okay. Then we'll post it over the next 2 weeks. We'll post some example files for y'all to download and play with. And
John, I'll reach out to you how you updated. Thanks.
And again, we're hoping for the Creative Summit coming up next week that there may be some new Apple tools around this area. We're not sure, but hope springs eternal. Okay, general questions. Michael Lake of Toronto said, is multi-language streaming possible on YouTube Live, or would I have to set up multiple streams for each language?
Currently, you have to set up multiple streams for each language, and most of the platforms are not really built to give you multiple. The AV Foundation player from Apple will do that. You can insert. We can encode different languages for it, but outside of that, most of the platforms that we have require. Someone's got an open mic. Guy, you have an open mic. Okay, or someone does. Not maybe not Guy, but I heard the name there. So So I think that usually for YouTube, you're going to have to build multiple ones. Now, the way we do that is usually either sending to the cloud, or with our encoders, we put all the audio channels onto one SDI stream, and then in our encoder, we pick off the languages that we want to reinsert. So you still have to encode a bunch of video. That's the thing that's inefficient in the current structure.
Okay,
we'll talk about that more on tomorrow. multi-language.
Charles Hendrickson of Annapolis says, will Apple's inclusion of D-Vision into the iPhone 12 pressure the prosumer mirrorless camera manufacturers to include more computational processing and D-Vision?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the hardest part for camera manufacturers, is keeping up with the phone manufacturers. So it's absolutely going to put pressure on it. I mean, I shot some test footage with the 12 over the weekend, and I have a hard time. If I'm not going to do something like a 6K, I have a hard time understanding what I'm using the smaller cameras for. I mean, I still have a still camera that's going to get me short depth of field. I've got big lenses and stuff like that, but it's that weird pocket camera world. I don't know what that brings me anymore. I think a lot of people don't. That's why these camera companies are having so much trouble.
And the final question of the day comes from the panel's own Roscoe Jones. Has Blackmagic said anything about Resolve and the M1 chip on the Mac?
Well, I believe that we saw the Resolve in the keynote. So I have a feeling that I don't know whether 17 supports it, but something has to be coming soon if 17 doesn't, because we saw Resolve, we saw Cinema 4D, obviously Logic and Final Cut. So I don't think Apple would show those if either weren't shipping available or very close. Any other hands up? I can't
Nope.
see it on this phone.
Mickey, just at the last moment here.
Good, Mickey.
And then Stuart.
I mean, like, even if they don't release like natively coded binaries for it, wouldn't Rosetta take care of it, at least for the meantime?
Yeah. No, you should be able to play it. It will play a little slower, and Resolve is a pretty big it's a pretty big hog when it comes to wanting a lot of processing power. But I think that, again, I don't think that they would have featured it or shown it in the keynote if it wasn't either running native or close to it.
Stuart.
I would expect Resolve, because it runs in the software, it really doesn't care about the M1 chip, with one exception, and that would be its access to the GPU for GPU rendering.
Right. It's just a matter of, for the companies that spend a lot of time keeping up with Metal and really programming for the architecture, the change to the new architecture is very small. For the companies that kind of rolled their own and didn't want to spend the effort on it, the changes will be more dramatic.
Roscoe, since it was your question, I saw you almost raise your hand. Do you want to pop into the end of this?
Oh, no, I was just, Resolve wants to be processor intensive. It's going to be GPU intensive. So I don't want to go through Rosetta. I want to go right to the, hardware.
That makes sense. All right, Alex, I think we're done for the day.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We had a couple seconds left, and we made it. So hope that's a good primer for what we're talking about with Vision, to kind of get you onto the ball field. But we're going to keep on having. You're going to see us put up a couple of sections in Discord. There are areas that we just really want to focus on, and these are two of the areas that we think are really important. And so, in addition, again, to virtual events and e-learning, as well as AR, dealing with high dynamic range and surround, I think are a place where we can, as a group, build a mind trust, and our understanding of it, even mine and everyone here, is going to get much deeper as we all keep talking about it. So, thank you all for hanging out with us. And next week or tomorrow, we'll be talking about multi-language streaming. So more of what we just talked about at the end of there. And until then, I'll